Thank you for tuning in to my Q&A this week. The questions I'm going to go over in this video are on the songwriting process that we use in Trapping and how we arrange songs. It's on if it's important to understand the harmony of the songs you're playing over. There's a question on dealing with nerves before a performance. And then there's also a question on extensions in arpeggios and in harmony and how you deal with that. Remember that if you have a question for one of these Q&A videos, then you can leave a comment on this video. That's probably how I get most of the questions that I'm using for these Q&A videos. And I anyway try to get back to everybody who comments on my videos. But another option is of course also just to send me a message on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. And then I can see if I can take up your question in a later Q&A video. If you want to help me keep making these videos, then like this video. If you're not subscribed to my channel, you can of course subscribe to my channel. And another way you can do that is also just to check out my web store. Maybe there's something that you find useful there. That's also a way that you can sort of directly support my Q&A videos and my lessons and all the other things that I'm doing. Let's just get to the questions. Do you think it's important for a jazz guitar player to understand the harmonic theory of every song you play? I mean, is it a must to understand how the chords fit together? In a few tunes there are quite more complicated chords, and I sometimes think I have to understand how they fit together. Or maybe it's just hearing and playing. So there's no sort of black and white answer to this, because I think in general you have to be able to play the song, and whether you understand the chords that you have to play over or not, you still have to get them to sound good, and then you just need to sit down and work out how to get them to sound as well as you can. So that means that you don't actually have to understand them all the time. You also just have to say, well, these are the chords, that's what I have to play, how can I make it into something that sounds good? You can probably play any type of progression and make it sound sort of okay, you know, I mean, within limits obviously, but still, most stuff will be something that you can get to sound quite natural. And there are also just a lot of songs that you cannot really explain what's going on with the harmony, so you can't tell why this chord is coming after the next one. So if you're playing something like a Wayne Shorter or anything, actually just anything that's written later, then a lot of it will be non-functional, and maybe it will be more of like modal, so it's going to be like one sound for a bit and then another sound, and there's not really a relation between the two chords. It's just about one nice sound and then the next nice sound. So in that way you always just have to know when to not try and understand things and just try and play on it and see what kind of sense that makes to you. And also the idea of understanding it is of course that you then have an idea about how it sounds. So if you don't understand it, then you just have to play it and then see how it sounds, and maybe that's going to tell you, okay, it actually kind of sounds like this. I do that a lot with songs that are not strictly functional, that when I'm playing them I start realizing, oh, in fact this is kind of like a tritone substitute, or it's a 4 minor between these two chords, something. I'll have these sort of associations with them, and that's going to tell me what it sounds like and how the chord acts and how the notes move from one chord to the next. I think that's the way I use the theory when I'm playing songs that are not really functional. So because I get that question quite a lot also about analyzing stuff like Wayne Shorter and stuff, and you can't really analyze it. It's about some movement that it's more this thing that is like a beautiful sound here and a beautiful sound here, or some chords that happen to sound nice together but you don't really know why, and you have to make your own sense of it. And so these questions about analyzing that, there's no real way to do that, and that's okay. You know, you don't have to. Not all harmony has to be something that you can explain. So yeah, so in that way it's like you don't have to understand everything. However, if you do understand it, if you can figure it out, you want to be as good at understanding harmony as you can. And the reason why I want to do that is because, especially if you're working with understanding harmony in a way where you get it to describe how it sounds. So that's why I keep hammering on about the functional harmony and how I use that and how that works in my playing and in my way of working. Because for me it's a way of describing how things sound. And if you know that, then that means that you can it's easier for you to sort of absorb a piece of music. If you have an idea about that, okay, this is a 4 minor chord, so you already kind of know what it sounds like, then when you play it, you're just going to confirm how it sounds, and that means that the process of getting it into your ears and really hearing the song and the harmony and how it moves is shorter, and that's just very efficient. And that's actually the point of the theory. I think it's not so much about figuring out the right scale and stuff like that, but it's more about getting a theory that really describes what you what you hear, so that you can use that when you're confronted with a new piece of music that you're studying. So the thing you need to do is you need to understand as much as you can about the pieces and how the different chords move and what is normal, and so that means also that you have to generalize, especially if you're playing standards. Then that's quite easy to understand the different forms. When the songs are typically going to something like 4 minor, where's the typical places for the dominant or the dominant, those kind of things, and that means that if you play another piece, maybe it's in another key, but if you can sort of look on the level where you just understand the harmony, then you already know, even though it's a completely different piece in a different key, how some of that is going to sound, because it's similar to something else you're already playing and you understand how it works. So that's the benefit of understanding it. And then for the rest, I mean, yeah, so I guess it's like finding this sort of balance between those two. I mean, don't get obsessed with understanding everything, because some stuff you don't understand really. I find for myself now, I'm going to talk in another question about songwriting, and I don't think about theory when I'm writing music, and that means that when I have to play my own songs, I actually have to sit down and try to figure out what is going on harmonically, and how that works, how I'm going to play on them, how I'm going to hear the different chords and how they sort of fit together, because the music I write is not, it's like most modern jazz, it's not strictly functional. It will have functional parts, but it will also just have stuff that's completely modal and islands of sound and stuff like that. So and then you have to sort of figure out, okay, well, what does it sound like? And that's where I use the functions to describe the different progressions a bit, even though it gets a bit chaotic, and it's going to also be maybe a bit personal, because it depends just on where you put the emphasis on the chords and what you hear really moving. So yeah, so I hope that kind of helps. So yeah, try and understand things, but also know when to just try and sit down and play on it and figure out. You can play over most chords without actually having to understand them anyway, if you have sort of a basic idea about how to fit some scales and some chords and play them on some arpeggios, and read the chord symbols, of course. So I would say, see if you can find a balance with that. But the most standards, you're going to have like 95% of what is going on, you should be able to understand. Those pieces are almost never mysterious in how they're built up. They're just very well written, but they're quite systematical and quite predictable also. Hey Jens, been streaming a lot of Trapping stuff lately, and it's really great. I was wondering if you could talk a minute about how your songwriting process works when deciding upon the arrangement of a jazz album. Do you all have your own ideas and jam them out, or is there one member kind of leading the process while the others log into it? Thanks. Well, thank you. I'm glad you like the music. If you guys don't know Sean, he has a YouTube channel that by now is getting absolutely huge, and he does a lot of lessons. He does some collaborations with some covers, and he's also working on some original stuff, and he's going to release an album, I think, in the beginning of next year. So the stuff he does is it's not jazz, it's more in the sort of pop rock genre, but they're great videos, so they're well worth checking out. I'll link to his channel in the description of this video, you can check it out. So with this songwriting thing, so I guess with Trapping, and I think with most jazz bands, the process is so that one person is gonna bring in the material, and then of course everybody has a freedom to contribute, in the sense that when in the interpretation, so that's something you do while rehearsing. And for Trapping, it's like this, that I write most of the music, the bass player Olaf writes a few tunes as well, but mostly it's me writing the stuff. And I guess in part because we're busy and we don't have time to rehearse, but also just in part because that just tends to work better, is that when I bring in a song, I have a very strong idea about how it's supposed to be played, or we'll spend time in when it's a little bit both of the things that you're talking about. So we do all contribute to what is going on, but I think in general the person writing the tunes, or in most cases that's me, will sort of have a little bit more of an idea about what is going on and what I want, and then we'll try to work towards that. And that means that sometimes songs will change because we don't rehearse a lot, we don't have time simply. So what we end up doing is that we just sort of quickly go over the tunes. I have a pretty good idea about what I want to have in the main melody, and then we leave it a little bit open in the solos to what can happen, and then we just try it out on gigs when we're playing concerts, and then sort of discuss what we can do in between with rehearsals also, if we have a rehearsal. We actually went 1.5 years without a rehearsal in that band, so but of course now that we need to go to make another record soon, we have to start rehearsing again once in a while. But in general we don't actually rehearse that much because it's hard to get people together, and we played a lot together, so that means that we can also the sort of the improvised part we rely a lot on that we just know each other. We played so much together that we can always, for a big part, try and find each other and go in different directions and keep the connection, and then we just have to agree on what the song is really like, and then hope that we don't make any mistakes, which of course we also do, because when you improvise you take chances. But yeah, so we're, and I think actually most jazz albums are made like this, so there are going to be like a few rehearsals, and then you go into the studio and then you record them, and that's pretty much it. Like a jazz album is, as far as I know, pretty much a live recording. On the last Trappin album, we did something that was at least unusual for a jazz album, because we doubled, like some of the music on the last Trappin album is not so jazzy, so it's not like a standard really, and that means that it really has riffs, and it has there is stuff in there that's going to be played the same every time. I think there is that element above, beyond just the idea of a song. For me is more than just a set of chords and a melody. I might actually have some sort of riff or some sort of rhythm that I'll stick to, at least in the theme, and then probably it will appear in the solos as well. But some of those things are pretty sort of laid out and they're the same every time. So we doubled some of those on the guitars. We tried to do it on the saxophone as well, but that didn't really work. Which is something like, so we actually overdubbed. I played exactly the same part for the themes in some cases, just to try and see how that worked, if we could get the sound a bit wider. And then we tried to do the same with the saxophone. And it worked for the guitar, it doesn't really work for saxophone. But normally, if I also in the previous albums we recorded, and normally if I'm recording with a jazz ensemble, we actually just go into a studio and play live, and then that's it. And then of course it's going to be edited or some, and mixed. But it is essentially just a recording of a band playing together, hopefully in one room, or at least in places so you can see each other. Even though that's also not always the case, but you can at least hear each other. So that's kind of how you record a jazz album. And then with the arrangements, it's difficult to talk about this without actually having the songs there, but we were going for the stuff that I was writing at that time. I was really experimenting a lot with using riffs in jazz, and these riffs sometimes would be the melody and sometimes would have a melody on top of them, and those are the parts that are sort of really staying the same all the time, so that you can double them, and they pretty much stay the same. You can't really, they're written so that you can't change them, which is also okay. You can change stuff in the solos. We then have to find a way to play more open and not play the riff and those kind of things. So those things are really, I really had those already before I went into the rehearsal room with the guys. And then we just had to figure out exactly what the bass was doing and exactly what the drums were doing. because me and the saxophone player were already sort of set for, okay, this is what we have to play. And then we had, well, I mean, I think we tried out a few things with some of the other songs. So there are some of the more quiet songs that are where we might have tried different feels, and there's, well, actually that idea I already had. So there was one song. There's also one song where basically me and the saxophone player are only playing the melody, and then the two other guys are kind of soloing behind us, but still comping. So they're not really laying down a groove, and but that idea I already had. That I'm not sure where I got that from, but I probably heard somebody do that somewhere. So that idea was also already there, and so it's a bit of both. Sometimes you will have to just look for, okay, what is really going to be great. Also because when you're writing for people in a band, then you need to have the things. If you get their input, it's more. I mean, even though I know what they play like, sometimes it's just better if they say, when I play something, that they'll hear, okay, I hear this, and this fits, and I want to play this behind it, and then we can talk about that. And then sometimes, most of the time, that already works. I think they know me so well that if I play something, and I have a strong idea about what it is, and I play it, and I can just set it down, then they know what fits on it. And sometimes we'll just have to sort of try a few things, and then we'll end up with something. And maybe, as I said, also very often this is something we'd actually do on gigs. So we'll try out material, and then we'll talk about it, and then there is a chance that I might release some video of the same song with a little over 6 months in between, because there's almost two different songs. So. But I'm not sure if I have a good recording of the second part of it. Otherwise, that's going to be like on the record. But the first way we played it is quite different from what we're ending up with. Yeah, so that's a bit vague because it's sort of, we do both, but that's how we work. Hi, on an extended arpeggio, for example, a major 13, is the 6 included in the arpeggio or just the 13? And are the higher and lower 6 and 13s also included as well? So it's becoming sort of a common thing for this Q&A that all the questions are going to be yes and no as an answer. So because also this thing with extensions, arpeggios and extensions are a little bit less well defined than with voicings. So maybe just to explain. So the thing is that when we have, if you have a C7 with a G7 with a 13, like this, you probably know that voicing already, then this voicing sounds good if the 13, so which is the same as the 6, is higher than the 7th. If I turn around these two, if I flip them so that the 7th is in fact higher than the 13, then you get this voicing. I hope you get this voicing. And that doesn't sound that good. This sounds a lot better. So in this case, the 13 is only going to work if it's next to. You could probably have it like this as well, as you can do that. Maybe do this. So it's a hard chord to play. And then that will work as well, so you know that's probably like this kind of sound, where the 13 and the 7s are next to each other. That's okay. But the other way around, where it's a little bit like we have a G6 with an added 7 on top, that's not really going to work. So that's why it's going to be called a 13th, because it's sort of placed higher in the extension order. And then when you want to convert this to arpeggios, then that gets tricky, because we're used to arpeggios being something that we can just repeat in octaves. So our concept of an arpeggio is, or if you take like triads or 7th chords, and when we're talking about a chord like a 13 chord or a 9 chord, then you have some notes that are only found and sort of only working in the higher octave, and that means that you can, of course, and then there are like two things you can do, because it's not so important with the placement when you're soloing. So if I want to use a G13 arpeggio, or in fact I want to just play a G play the 13 on this chord, then I can play it lower. That will work, but so the sort of the whole thing about the order of the extensions is going to be a little bit less important when you're just playing that one note than when you have it in the chord where you might sustain it and where they will sound at the same time. So in that way you could just add the note to the standard arpeggio. So for instance, if you have a G7 like this, you can just add the 13 in there, and then that's still going to work as an arpeggio, and then you have it every octave, and you don't have to think about whether it's a 6 or 13 really, because and also that whole discussion with an arpeggio, if you do like this, that doesn't necessarily make sense, because the 13 is something where the definition of it is that it's well, if you go all the way up, like it's that it's up here if the root is down there. So that would be the other option. So let's just first stay with. So if we have our G7 arpeggio with the added 13 or 6 or whatever you want to call it, because a little bit the term gets a little bit meaningless to me. But in case, because we have the 7 already, then the 13 makes just a little bit more sense to call it like a 13. Then it's not truly a 13 chord in that way, and you can just use it. I think, is it Ted Green? Ted Green has a book about something, and I think he calls it condensed arpeggios. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but there is like a Ted Green book where he goes over some lines that I played some examples from a million years ago, and there are some arpeggio shapes that are sort of some arpeggios with some added extensions. You can also see quite quickly that when I start doing this, you will get some sort of, already here we're actually close to something you could just call a pentatonic scale, and then figure out like that, and look at it as a scale also. So it's moving away from being a chord. It quickly becomes more of a scale. Even so the thing where you want to stick with the fact that it's a 13, then you have to play it as a 13 arpeggio, and not just as a G7 with an added something extra note. And when you want to do that, then you can't really invert it, and you just can't insert it in all octaves, because it's only going to make sense if you do it like, and then you almost need the whole structure to get the sound out, or at least part of it. So in that way, that only makes sense. And there's the funny thing, because most of the time when I want to play extensions, I actually would just take an arpeggio that's not the arpeggio from the root, but maybe the arpeggio from the 3rd or the 5th, or a triad from the 6th or something, you know, all these different kind of things you can play on top of it, and then I'll use that to get the sound of that extension on this chord in the line that I'm playing. So if I wanted to sort of get the 13 out, I might play an E minor. So that would be some sort of E minor 7 on a G7 that you will use to sort of take that 13 sound and really pull that out. And since I'm doing that, but at the same time I'll also just sometimes use arpeggios that I can't invert, and those are going to be like the stacks of thirds that are above an octave, and I never really worked on trying to invert those, but that's also okay, because I'm not really looking for that. I'm just looking for like if I do, you know, so here I actually even went up to the 11, even though 11 is not really a nice note for the G7, but okay. So in that way, I'm actually using the whole 13 arpeggio, and then this is not something that I want to try to make inversions of, because what I want to hear then is really all those thirds. That's the melody I want. And I do that quite a lot actually, especially the nines. So I have most of the arpeggios, like I have an idea about what the 9 arpeggio is. I practiced those as well, and I never tried to invert them. I only invert the arpeggios to stay within the octave. I never really thought about whether it made sense to try and do it with the other ones. But yeah, you're gonna end up, yeah, well, but if you do, you're gonna end up with the sort of the G7 with the 13 added, those kind of sounds. So then you're gonna end up in the sort of condensed arpeggio idea, I think. Yeah, but at the same time, so the 9 arpeggios, for instance, they do have a certain sound, and that's something that's useful that you can apply. I do that. Wes does it a lot, up to the 11 actually. He does this thing. I think he plays it there, and he's surely not the only one who does that. I know of a few other people where I've seen them use exactly this type of arpeggio, and that's a common thing to do. So you can just experiment with that as well. But in general, I would say don't try to look for the whole thing with the extensions. Extensions are not so important. If you want to take the extensions out, probably the most practical way to do that is to learn to use other arpeggios on top of a chord. It's more efficient in terms of how much you have to work, because if you just know your diatonic arpeggios and your diatonic triads, you can just use those. And this way of thinking in terms of extended arpeggios is not necessarily gonna really give you a lot to work with melodically, because then you're gonna get stuck in having to play stacked thirds all the time, and that's fine. But if you're stuck with it, then it's not fine. Then you're better off just knowing all your diatonic 7th chords in inversions and your diatonic triads in inversions and stuff like that, and just practice those in the scale. So what I mean by that, maybe I should just explain that. So if we have the G7 again, so all these. So the G7 is of course found in C major, and then just all these 1 octave arpeggios. And the better you know them, and the more you know about how they work, you sit down and figure out like how does each of these works if they work with a chord. And how do they sound, and how can I work with them? That's probably what you want to look at. I think that's the way to look into emphasizing certain extensions, and and don't get hung up on extensions in themselves. Actually, in the end, you're going to be more better off focusing on playing a little bit lower in the chord, and then only using the extensions every once in a while. And if you start transcribing solos from jazz people, you'll find that they do that more also. That when they're really playing lines, then it's lower in the chord, it's more connected to the harmony. That's part of the style. Similar to what is also part of the style for country, even though they just don't use extensions as often. Yeah, so I hope that helps a bit. Even though it's a yes and no answer, but it's that kind of day. Hey Jens, maybe another question for your Q&A sessions. Do you get nervous before your presentations? You said in another video that you also make presentations to children, not only in bigger venues for adult audiences. How do you handle these different situations psychologically? Especially when you play for bigger audiences. And what was the biggest audience that you played for? Thanks a lot. So in keeping with the rest of the questions in this Q&A, this question is also answered with a yes and no, because I do get nervous, I guess. But the question is, when is it nervous, and then when is it just excited? I play music for a living, and I do that because I like it, and I enjoy the excitement of having to perform as well. I think so. It's not really about getting nervous all the time. It's also just about being excited. And I'm not sure when is it exciting and when do you get nervous. So yeah, that can be a bit tricky. Of course, you get used to handling it. Also, that's also something that makes a difference. And then in terms of bigger audiences, I played live for audiences. Well, I played on live TV and live radio, and I'm not sure how many people that is, but that's probably in the hundreds of thousands. And then I've also played venues up to 2,000-3,000 people, but some of that has also been in an orchestra, where most of the time you just sit and do your part and you don't have to worry too much about it. And then there are like the few spots where you're sort of the soloist with an orchestra. That's then quite exciting. But at the same time, it's also just fun to try. So these things are, I mean, you get nervous, but it's not. It doesn't have to be bad nervous. It's not panic. It's just you're just excited to play, and it's an interesting experience. You're trying to enjoy the experience as well. I think that's an important part of it. So yeah, so in that way you don't really get nervous, or at least you learn to handle it and work with it and be aware of. I think you especially have to be aware of how you react yourself in nervous situations. So when I was studying, I was aware that I didn't like being nervous on stage, and then one of the things that I did to train that and get used to it was that I made sure that I played as many end exams as I possibly could through my whole study for other people. So I was playing guitar for a lot of end exams every year, and those are some of the most nerve-wracking things to do, because you have to play, and it's not really about you, but you have to play well, and you have to usually accompany or play along with somebody who is nervous and where funny things will happen on stage. And you have to be able to catch that and keep track of what is going on. So the whole situation is not nice in that way, and I found that to be really good training for when I then did my own end exams, and later also just playing. And I still get nervous. I get nervous for the weirdest gigs, and it's not about how many people I play for. I think other things are and then it's also and again it's still the nervous or excited. Where is that? Because it can be both. It can be a little bit like I'm nervous because I'm playing in a really small club, but I'm playing with people that I don't know, and I have to call the shots and be the leader. And then every time I play something and set down a groove, I'm very curious what's going to come out of what they do. And in those situations, then that's the places where I'm not sure if I'm nervous or if I'm excited. And then you have to sort of feel for yourself what is what, I think. Or I remember playing a concert with a band in a quite big jazz venue in Holland, and the first thing that happened in my first solo was that the whole band fell apart. So we went from having an idea about where we were to just be playing free jazz for my entire solo, and that happened within the first 10 seconds of the solo, I think. It didn't really have anything to do with me, but then you just also know, okay, now we're here, and we have to see how we get back without sounding like a train wreck, which we did, I think. But that's just, and then you just live in the moment, and that's like, okay, now something went differently than what you thought, but you can't panic. You just have to stick with what you have, listen to the other guys, and trust that they try to sort it out as well. So that's the important thing. I think it's like the thing with nerves is that you have to be aware that you cannot panic. You can just sit back and listen until you figure out what's going on, and then give yourself the space and keep control so that you don't do weird things. That's the thing that happens mostly with people that get nervous, is that they make strange mistakes, rookie mistakes also. And it says something about how well prepared they are, but also it can also just be just a question of the pressure that they're under. Yeah, so to get back to this, because I'm all over the place with this question. Yeah, so the things that make me nervous before a gig, it's not going to be the audience, it's going to be how well prepared we are. It's going to be what type of repertoire, how difficult it is, if I think we can actually play it or not. Because sometimes you have to play stuff and then you think, well, we can't really play this. We can maybe make it through it, but we can't really play it, because this is how it works. Or for instance, like I was filling in a pop band, and then they had a lot of guitar intros, and if you don't rehearse with them and you just get a list of songs and you realize that you have like 5 or 6 guitar intros, and you have to set down the tempo and stuff, then you hope that they do the same tempo as the record, and that you can remember what the tempo of the record is. Those kind of things are exciting, but that will also make you nervous, because it's hard to sort of get it right, because you don't know if they always play the song faster or something like that. You never know, and that will make you nervous. Or if you know that the sound is bad, if you know that you probably can't hear each other, those kind of things are worse for that than how many people are in the room. So those are the things that I find more stressful when I'm playing, and that can cause more trouble also. And you can also hear that the things that cause me trouble and that makes me nervous are about how well I can play. And actually it doesn't really matter to me if there's one person in the audience or if there's like 2 million. Of course, like the thought of it philosophically will make a difference probably, but I never played a gig for 2 million people. But at the same time, it's not so much about that. I'm more thinking about what are the conditions under which I have to play, and then worrying about that, and that is the stuff that's gonna make me nervous, stressed out. And then the only way I found to deal with it was actually just to try it, and not to be afraid to take chances and stuff. And I think, to be honest, I also think that I play like that. So especially like with the more concert things that I do, because of course if I'm playing one of the Jazz for Kids shows and stuff, we can't take too many chances. But if I'm playing with Trappin or just some standard gig in a cafe and stuff, I will take chances. I'll just try things out, and sometimes it can go horribly wrong, but then that's an experience as well. And most of the time you also have to keep it exciting, and you have to push it also for the guys you're playing with, and you keep moving, and otherwise it's going to get boring, I think. I like sort of pushing it a bit and going where I might not be able to handle it, just because then it's more exciting for me and for the people that I play with, and I think it's going to be the same for the audience. So, and this is already really subtle. I think most people that would be listening to what we're doing wouldn't really recognize that we're maybe trying to push certain things to the limit. But very often we are, and especially it's something I especially do with drummers, that we just I will sort of try to just pull us in some direction in another groove or something, just to see if they'll go there, and then see what they will do. And most of the people I play with know me, and they will do similar things quite often, which means that the guitar solo gets to be quite adventurous and sound very different from the rest of the song, and that can be quite interesting to do. I think it's also more interesting as a listener, and it's certainly a lot of fun to play, which is in my own sort of egocentric experience of my own concert. Then as long as I have fun, then I trust that the people that are listening will have fun as well. At least I think I have to have fun for them to have fun as well. So so I don't know, I hope it's not really vague what I'm saying here, but yeah, everybody, I think it's okay to get nervous. I think you have to learn to deal with it. You have to know how you react, and the only way you can do that is by getting into situations where you're nervous on a regular basis. And then once you are sort of aware of yourself and how you react to those situations, then you can deal with them quite easily. And probably if you ask people who do any kind of performance, they'll tell you it's quite a lot like this. So it's a lot about experience and about knowing yourself. So that was some answers to some of the questions I got from you guys. As always, if you have a question, then post a comment on this video, and then I'll try to get back to you, and maybe I can take it up in a Q&A. Or you can of course also just send me a message on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or Google+, and then I'll try to respond there, and then who knows, maybe I can take it up in a Q&A video. I think it's I do this because it's fun, and I've been asking you guys a lot about the content of the channel, and just trying to get some feedback from you guys, what you want to hear and what you like and stuff. And I'm still looking, and I'm also going to be experimenting more with especially the format of the lessons. I think I might have found a format now where I can do some stuff that I couldn't really figure out how to do with the other format, but we'll have to see if I can get away with that. Because I wanted to have something that gave more of an insight in how I make lines, and also so a little bit less like, okay, this is drop 2 voicing and here's some inversions, because that's useful too, but I already did that, and maybe I will remake some of those older lessons later. But I also wanted to see if I can find a format and find other things and experiment a little bit with it, so that I can try to cover some other subjects, really, because otherwise, and not unlike the thing with the question about playing, that if I get bored, then you guys are gonna get bored as well. So I have to keep it exciting for myself also, and I think that's an interesting challenge also, just to find a way to teach some other topics than what I've been doing. I mean, among it's going to be next to all the things that I'm already doing, because I will keep doing the same types of lessons that I already have done, because I mean, you guys subscribe for a reason, so that's why I make them, and a lot of them are useful, and some of them I will probably remake a few of them, because I have a better camera, better sound, and all that, and also I'm just more used to making the lessons, so I can probably do it better. But also just now I can maybe find some room for some other topics as well, which I think are important that I couldn't really fit in until now. So as usual, if you guys have some feedback on that or on this, things that you do differently, ideas, then they're always welcome. And for the rest, I'm just gonna keep on trying. So check out what's happening on the channel, and then you'll see by yourself, I think. If you like this video, then please like it here on YouTube, and if you're not subscribed to my channel, you can of course subscribe to my channel and keep up to date with all the stuff that's happening. So I do a weekly lesson, I do a weekly Q&A, and I do some backtracks, and there's all sorts of stuff happening, and it's always evolving, and there's a lot of people hanging around here also who know a lot of stuff, so it's worthwhile being here for that reason as well. Let's see, and I might have to skip one Q&A because I'm gonna be with Christmas, because I'm gonna be away, but maybe I'll make it in advance. I don't know if I have time, we'll have to see also, but I will at least make one next week as well, I'm quite sure, but we'll see. So thank you for watching, and until next week.